Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong. My name is Mark Ellis. I am joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Jacqueline, Coley. And Jacqueline, when you think about this time of year, some people go pumpkin spice latte, which I still have never tried, but I gotta say, I'm a little curious. For whatever reason, this is the first year that I've actually wanted to try it. What is happening to me?
You're getting older, and you're just embracing, like, your old manisms. I mean, look, I will say this. I don't see you having like a midlife crisis, but I could very much see you getting into like dad gear without having children. Like you're already embracing sometimes the dad jokes. You definitely enjoy sports puns better than most people. PSL is like, that's the extension. I hate pumpkin spice latte. If they ever made a sweet potato latte, I'd be all about that. But I am more of an eggnog girl.
Okay, so we got one
latte.
More like holiday. We got another half holiday season to go to assuage your thirst and appetite. But a lot of people do. There's a raging debate about candy corn right now. And of course it is Halloween. I am pro candy corn for what it's worth. And I'm also very pro this franchise that we are going to talk about today. Yep, we're talking about an entire franchise, and that would be Scream. It started back in the mid-90s, and it just turned the horror world on its ear. The meta-examination within a very fun whodunit sort of movie slasher film context directed by Wes Craven is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. We were so young. There's a 4K of the film coming out soon, and in January, get this, kids, Scream 5 is going to be released in theaters around the world. Most of the original cast coming back, at least the people that are still alive in the movie that didn't die off in the movie are coming back for Scream 5, we hope. And it's just going to be a fun time breaking this all down today because the first two films, certified fresh, no problem there. Scream 3, all the way down to rotten at 40%. Scream 4 rebounded for the most part. It got back to fresh barely at 60%. So we're going to be talking about what we love, what we don't like, and what we think Rotten Tomatoes might be wrong about with these four Scream movies that we have gotten a chance to see. And our guest today is a returning favorite, friend of the show, needs no introduction, mainly because he can tell me what to do, and so I'm going to give him a very good one. That would be the Rotten Tomatoes editor-in-chief. He's a horror enthusiast and a Scream stan. Joel Meares is back on the show. Joel, I say tomato, you say tomato. Let's not call the whole thing off because we're talking about Scream.
Absolutely. Nice to be here, Mark. Hi, Jacqueline. How you doing?
Hi.
This is going to be fun because I've known Joel for years now, and I think probably the first time we met, he did profess his love of Scream. But Joel, you also have some hot takes within the world of Scream. So what exactly is Rotten Tomatoes? Again, you're the editor-in-chief of Rotten Tomatoes. What is Rotten Tomatoes wrong about when it comes to this franchise?
It always puts me in a tricky position. Yeah, when actually my first day at Rotten Tomatoes, one of the things they do is ask you for your 5 favorite films, which is a column that we do. It's sort of a way of introduction, and Scream was number 1 on my list. So I think along with our good friend Perry Nemiroff, we are potentially some of the biggest Scream stands out there. So I think that Rotten Tomatoes is generally wrong-ish about the Scream franchise. I think they get some of it right in terms of the overall trajectory, but I quibble with the numbers themselves. So I do believe myself and most fans would say 1 and 2 are the best films and deserving of their certified fresh status, but I think they could be a tad higher. I think Scream is certified fresh at 79%. I think a horror classic of this ilk should at least be in the 90s. Then Scream 3 dripping down to rotten, I disagree with completely. I think it should be at least fresh. I think it's an underrated gem, and we can get into that in a bit. And Scream 4, 60%, I'm pretty fine with. But yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. But I'm always changing my opinion because these movies I rewatch probably constantly. I've probably seen Scream 1 upwards of 40 times, Scream 2 upwards of 50, and the others sort of in the 20s. And every time I have a different experience and sort of change my mind. So I have been warming to Scream 4 in the last couple of years in a way that I didn't love it when it first came out.
Yeah, I remember feeling the same way when Scream 4 first came out. And I was like, yeah, right, it was nice to see everybody again. But 40 times for that first one. It may change for you, Joel. It never changes for Tatum, unfortunately. Jacqueline, you now get the... I would say this is actually going to be a fun one to do a synopsis for, because sometimes we got the movies on here and it's like, yeah, what do I talk about? What do I leave out? But Scream, I mean, come on. You're going to talk about Ghostface and who he's killing.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to say this, Mark. I have been told that I don't get the duties today as a sort of tribute to the Scream aficionado that he is.
This
and
is
also
dangerous.
because I did not study to do that because I didn't think I was
you're
doing
asking me
it.
to do the homework I didn't do.
No, it said that you were doing it.
We all read our agendas here. Don't worry. We've read the spreadsheet. We know what's going on. I've been studying for this exam since I was about 12 years old. So, so the Scream franchise is a horror slasher franchise that centers on three characters, essentially. So there is Gail Weathers, played by Courtney Cox. She's an ambitious TV host, news reporter with likes to change her hairstyles from time to time. And then we have Dewey Riley, played by David Arquette, who is the deputy sheriff of Woodsboro, the local town, and sort of gets a career boost as the movies go on. And Sydney Prescott, who is our final girl, played by the great Neve Campbell, who was coming out of Party of Five when the first movie came out. She is variously a high school student, a college student, a therapist, and then a professional victim, I guess, in number 4. And so essentially what happens with each film is that they get attacked by someone with a ghostface mask. We wonder who it is and why they're doing it. The people around them in their lives get attacked, killed usually, and these 3 survive all the way through. And the big question is who and why is committing these brutal murders, which usually involve some form of technology. At the beginning of a few films, it was a phone call, a few quizzes. If you get it wrong, you die. Most famously in the opening scene with Drew Barrymore as Casey Becker. And then the interesting thing is that the films really do interesting things with the horror genre and the settings. The first one is kind of a play on Halloween meets Scooby-Doo and comments on the slasher genre. It's very meta. Everyone understands what they're doing. They're in a horror movie. 2 is sort of your college campus, and it looks at the idea of fame and violence. 3 is set in Hollywood. They're making the Stab movies, which is a series based on the original Woodsboro murders, which happened in Scream 1. So it gets very, very meta. And then 4 is kind of a reboot. And, well, it's definitely a reboot. It's kind of your Force Awakens, old gen, new gen, with a twist. And it comments on the nature of reboots. So there are rules for sequels, trilogy closers, which don't end up being trilogy closers, and reboots, and there's lots of blood. Kevin Williamson wrote and directed the first few. Didn't direct them, sorry. Wes Craven came in, directed them, all 4. So I guess that's it. And we're gearing up for number 5, and Dewey, Gail, and Sydney are back.
This is, we should have the guests do the synopsis every time, Jack, when it takes the work off of our plate. And Joel is 1 for 1 as far as guests coming in here and telling us what the hell we're talking about. That was delightful, Joel. But I'm not letting you off the hook yet because you did mention Scream 3 takes place in Hollywood, and I am going to make you defend that. I want more insight into your opinion as to why Rotten Tomatoes is wrong about that. But before we get there, let's bring in Producy Lucy. Let's make this a party right
What's
now.
up?
Producy Lucy is here.
Woo.
Are you a Scream queen?
Hell to the no. I watched it. When did the first one come out? 1996.
96.
So I didn't see it in theaters. I was 6 years old, but I probably saw it like 2 years later at a slumber party, and it effed me up in the brain. I can't do horror. And all I remember is the end scene where the guys are like stabbing, like Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard are like, aren't they like stabbing each other or something? They're like in the kitchen and bleeding.
Yeah.
That scene is seared into adolescent Lucy's brain. And sometimes when I lay awake at night, that's what I see.
All right, we got to get Lucy. We got to get Lucy back on this. You know, the 4K is coming out soon. I'm sure that we have some connections. We can get it to you, and you need to give this another chance because Joel, Jacqueline, and I are clearly fans of the franchise. And even if we have quibbles with specific movies within said franchise, it is just a fun one to celebrate, especially around this time of year. So, Joel, what is it about Scream 3, the movie that gets panned in the franchise more than any? It's 40% rotten, that Rotten Tomatoes got wrong.
Well, you know, I think the critics who reviewed the film at the time were very quick to dismiss it as not particularly scary and having fallen on some of the tropes that the first 2 films kind of skewered and parodied. But I think what they missed was that it was actually making a super interesting comment about the nature of Hollywood. And I think this is a film, I just think it's fun. So you got to take it as a comedy, right? So I don't know if we're getting too in the weeds before we hear from the critics in 2 Minutes with Tim. That's me, the editor-in-chief, saying, we haven't done 2 Minutes with Tim yet. But subtle there. Tim's waiting in the wings somewhere. But those critics, I think they missed the point that this was leaning very much into the comedy over the horror, which had been this sort of established in the franchise as a nice blend. And they did that partly because the Columbine murders had happened recently. They had to redirect the entire film to get away from sort of high school student violence. But I think it really works as a comedy. We can get into a bit more in a bit, but I love Parker Posey as Jennifer Jolie, clever name, who plays the Gale Weathers character in the Stab franchise. And it's being reassessed in the light of the Me Too movement, because if you watch this film again, it is essentially about a woman who is used and abused by Hollywood, that's Sidney Prescott's mother, by a character played by Lance Hendrickson, who was essentially a stand-in for Harvey Weinstein in the movie that was ultimately EP'd or produced by Harvey Weinstein. So it's actually a really interesting meta-commentary on what Hollywood does to people and the ultimate trauma, which actually then triggers the beginning of the original film. So I think it's got lightness and fun and is really well directed and executed. It's silly at times, but then there's this really dark, interesting underlying message that sort of resets the entire franchise.
He came to play today, Jacqueline. Joel not only came
I came in my shirt. This is my Jennifer Jolie shirt.
Wow. With those bangs on there too, I think.
This is Parker Posey's bangs. Just
this is Parker.
These are
Parker.
This is not the infamous Courtney Cox Scream 3 bangs.
Yeah.
This is the second time in a month that we've had a guest come in so excited to talk about a movie that they actually wore merchandise based on said film. We had Eric Striffler with The Mummy, and then we have Joel Meares with Scream 3. Jacqueline Coley, before we get to 2 Minutes with Tim, because Joel really wants us to get there now, what is your take on the Scream franchise? What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes Tomatometer got wrong?
I think that in truth be known, I don't think it's actually that far off. I would say that the first two, I think, are judged on a pre-elevated horror critical community that basically were pleasantly surprised that it was watchable, had a plot, and a little bit more to say than big boobs and dying girls. You know what I mean? Like that was where they were at that point. And now looking at how it recontextualized the way we view horror and how we sort of the commercialization of that before Tim jumps out in this next segment and calls me wrong because people did it before Scream, but Scream did it in a way that brought in teen girls, which is still to this day the thing that does not get talked about. I remember watching Dawson's Creek on the CW, and they played promotions of Scream like on the every commercial break because Kevin Williamson, who did Dawson's Creek, also wrote Scream. And so that was the thing. They made this a horror movie that just wasn't for, these horror head kids. It was also something that teen girls could get into. And by the time we get to Scream 2 with Jerry O'Connell, they are leaning into that for everything that it's worth. Look at how many Tiger Beat I would say frequents are in these movies.
That's an excellent point. If you don't want to wait for your life to be over, then you should probably act on it now, especially if you're Drew Barrymore's character, because it's not going to last long. I actually feel similar to Joel when it comes to Scream 3, because I remember seeing it in the theater. I remember having some good scares in that movie, in addition to some laughs. And so I don't think that it belongs down there at 40% rotten. I'm going to put it up there on a par with Scream 4, and I'm going to get it too fresh, because there is a scene in particular that still can creep me out to this day in Scream 3. And it's when Sidney Prescott sees what she believes is like the ghost of her mom, like slowly walking toward. Ooh, that is good horror movie stuff right there. That is some goods. Now, whatever happens after, you can debate, but oh my God, that's a legit scare in a movie theater. And I think we can all agree that the first Scream feels like a 90 or a 95%er. It doesn't feel like it belongs with the C+ kids like me in the high 70s. And so now we are going to move on to see what the critics had to say about Scream at the time of those movies release for our segment that we love, because we love our expert review curation manager, Tim Ryan at Rotten Tomatoes. Here it is, 2 Minutes with Tim.
2 Minutes with Tim. Scream wasn't the first horror film to satirize the conventions of the genre. Student Bodies and the Evil Dead movies had it beat by a few years, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein by decades. And director Wes Craven had previously made his own meta-slasher movie in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. But Scream's monster success laid the groundwork for self-aware horror to come, which included the likes of Final Destination to Cabin in the Woods to the Scary Movie franchise, which took its name from the title of Scream's original script. So let's break down the franchise by the numbers. Scream is certified fresh at 79% with 75 reviews. Scream 2 is certified fresh at 81% with 79 reviews. Scream 3 is rotten at 40% with 126 reviews. And Scream 4 is fresh at 60% with 187 reviews. So what did the critics have to say? In a fresh review for the original Scream, Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times wrote that it was a brava, provocative send-up of horror pictures that's also scary and gruesome, yet too swift-moving to lapse into morbidity. However, in a rotten review of Scream 3, Mark Caro of the Chicago Tribune wrote that despite the various surprise cameos and cute twists, it takes itself too seriously and adheres too strictly to its formula to avoid becoming what it parodies. So that's Scream. Let's kick it back to Jacqueline and Mark, two people who know that there are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a podcast. Back to you, folks.
I'm not sure Tim is as big of a fan of these movies as we are. I detected some saltiness.
The shade was knee deep on that one. You could definitely feel his accurate assessment, but heavy-handed dismissal. Can we say that?
I think that's a fair assessment. And he's absolutely right. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I think, came out 2 years before Scream, but it was kind of a warm-up. I love that film. And it's great. It's really well done, but it's not the perfect sort of mechanical thing that Scream is. It doesn't get everything right. It's playing with the same ideas. I think it's super scary, but it's not quite there. I think it's those ideas have been played with, but had they been done in this way, I don't know. Tim, meet me out back.
I'm gonna have a little chat there between Tim Ryan and Joel Meares, and we're about to have a little chat right now about the actual movies themselves and what we love, what we think could have been better about the Scream franchise thus far. It's time for movie talk. All right, it is our favorite Scream movie time. I can't get around. I would love to have a hot take about this, Joel and Jacqueline, but the first Scream just does, it checks every box for me. I saw it in the summer of '96 in a theater. My friends had already seen it, and they said, you're going to love this movie. We were down at the beach for some reason, and so we went to a movie theater, and I fell in love with it. I loved the horror. I loved the humor. It was the perfect combination. And Joel, going off what you said about Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which you did a couple years prior, it feels like that movie had most of the ingredients. This one put them all in the Vitamix and just made the perfect smoothie of a movie and added a lot more humor, because New Nightmare is actually the least funny Freddy Krueger's had been since the original Nightmare on Elm Street. He didn't have a lot of one-liners like he did in Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. And so having that sense of humor and the fact that it hit me when I was in high school and I'm watching high school kids go through all this, it made a perfect elixir for me. Scream 1, by far my favorite.
I'll say Scream 2 is my favorite overall. Its favorite being the one I like to return to the well most frequently to watch. And I think that's primarily because for me, it just has so many sort of rewatchable set pieces in the way that Scream is kind of a perfect film. But ultimately, between that opening kill and the first sort of interaction where Sydney gets her first phone call and gets with Ghostface, there's not a huge amount of sort of bigger set pieces that happen. And I think in Scream 2, until, of course, the finale in the house where it traumatized Lucy for many years, Scream 2 has just more, for me, again, spectacular things I like to rewatch. So you've got the opening scene with Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps, which I think is degree of difficulty to try and match that Drew Barrymore scene, but do it in a really innovative way that isn't full of jump scares, but is absolutely traumatizing and emotionally wrenching, I think. And Jada Pinkett Smith is so good in that scene, is incredible. Then you've got the Cece, Sarah Michelle Gellar, in the sorority house, which is a kind of nice nod to the opening scene of Scream, and does it, I think, pretty effectively as a sort of homage and similar kind of sequence. And then they kill off Randy to give us the big shock death in a really fun daylight scenario. I think Scream 2 is by far the gayest. I think it gay baits the hell out of me, and I love it for it, because the hair improves incredibly. You've got Timothy Oliphant and Jerry O'Connell just giving me those vibes all throughout the film. You've got theater class, you've got dramatic theater class with like, the scene where the weird Trojan sort of situation, but it's very hyped up and very, and then you've got Laurie Metcalf as the most ridiculous over-the-top villain in maybe horror history since Jason's mother in Debbie Salt. So I think it really lays it on. So it's my favorite, but I will say on the Scream, the original Scream is definitely the reason I'm in my job. Like, it's the thing that ignited my passion for movies. I saw that in the cinema when I was 12 years old with my friend. My brother, who's a bit older than me, had come back from movies 2 days before and said, you need to see this movie. It's terrifying, and be there for the opening scene. And my friends and I convinced his mother not to go, but to go with us to the line and convince some guy in line to pretend he was our uncle so that we could get in, because it was rated MA 15+, which is an Australian rating where you have to be 15 or have a guardian. And we got in it, and the movie traumatized and delighted me, and I was on a path ever since then that led me down the movie passion lane, but also to Rotten Tomatoes. So I have a big space in my heart for number one, but it's the one I want to just watch when I'm two bottles of wine, 2 glasses of wine in on a Thursday night, and just want to sort of get that comfort food. It's always going to be, and the scene in the film school, I cannot, when she's sort of in the soundproof booth with Dewey. There's so many great sequences.
Yeah, the first Scream, it's like any high school kid should be able to relate to some character in there. And Scream 2 is more for the theater kids, where you get to celebrate all the sets and stuff like that. And you bring up a bottle or maybe a glass of wine. Jacqueline, I never had anybody stand in line for me to buy a ticket at a movie theater. We were too busy tracking down randos in the parking lot of the grocery store to go buy us beer. That was the main thing that we needed from adults at that time. It wasn't buying a movie ticket. I also think in Williamsburg, Virginia, I bought a ticket to Nightmare on Elm Street 6 when I was 12 years old. They did not bat an eye. And so I think they were just a little more forgiving in the woods where I grew up. And you got to see all the Scream movies at some point in your life. Which one stands out as the GOAT?
Scream 3. Just kidding. No.
Don't be coming.
No. I literally am like, because I feel like we all talked about it. I saw all of these except for Scream 4 in the theater. This is what's weird. On its face, Scream 2 should be my favorite. And in ways it is, because it has some of my favorite scenes. I can't believe I'm going to be the first one to mention Jerry O'Connell standing on a freaking cafeteria table singing David Partridge, I Think I Love You, which was given us courtesy of David Cassidy. Like, come on.
Hey, I think I love you, so what am I so afraid of? I'm afraid that I'm not sure of. A love there is no cure for. I think I love you, isn't that what life is made of? And though it worries me to say,
like, that is probably one of the great spontaneous song scenes. And I think Heath Ledger robbed it for every inch it was worth in 10 Things I Hate About You. But anyway, like, I love that movie. But the reasons why I hate it is because of the Randy dying scene, and because I literally was like, I cannot believe they're killing him. Like, I know it's brilliant, but like, I have there's too much emotion attached to the people they killed in this movie. When they killed him, and when she didn't believe Jerry O'Connell was not the killer, I was just like, I was so mad at her. I think I was mad at Neve Campbell for like a good decade after that. Like, easily a good decade after that. I was so over her. Like, I couldn't deal with her.
I have a question about sororities and fraternities, because we in Australia don't really have these. I grew up in Australia. And so our education about this comes from movies. And so I watched Scream 2 and think, is this what college is like in America? Sans the murders. And I'm curious, is this giving your Greek letters, which happens in the film? Jerry O'Connell's character controversially gives his letters from his fraternity in a necklace to Sidney Prescott, much to Mickey/Timothy Oliphant's warnings that you shouldn't do that. Is that a thing that happens? Is that like a show of love to give your letters to someone?
I don't know about that.
It's
class
sort
ring
of like
is.
It's like in high school when you did the class ring. If you were in a fraternity, you might give your letter. It depends on college by college. I was not in a fraternity. It was not really needed to get into the fraternity parties at Wake Forest. And so I'm like, well, I can just go to every fraternity party instead of just one. That sounds like more booze for me. And so you just kind of bounce around. But they also have these formals where you get to invite someone that you are fancy on, and that's kind of like a big deal in there. And so it's pretty accurate. And then the way that fraternities are portrayed in movies, if you go back to something like Animal House, it's not quite that dramatic, and it's not obviously that much debauchery going on, but there's the potential for it. And then it also is a perfect setting to have a murder mystery that we have to solve. And so if you have that, if you have something like Happy Death Day, there's a lot of fun to be had on college campuses, as long as it's a fictional murder that we have to solve.
And just one last Scream 2 thing. We can't get off Scream 2 without acknowledging the brilliance of Portia de Rossi and Rebecca Gayheart, who have this like 3 lines in the movie, but kind of get away with it as these 2 sorority girls.
Yeah.
Incredible. Hi. No, I really mean that. Hi.
Hi, Sydney. Hey, this must be flat out hell for you. How are you holding up?
I managed.
It's really weird, isn't it? To think this fuss is all because of you. I mean, not directly, but in some 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon way.
Yeah. Now, Hallie, are you gonna bring your friend to our little martini mixer tonight?
I have a lot of work
We'll
to do.
be there.
Oh, good. Because Sid, we have our eyes on you.
You hang in there, and if there is anything we can do, the Delta Lambdas are very sensitive to your plight.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
That's the fun that I love about Scream, though, too, is because the movie franchise kicks off with Drew Barrymore, and you see Drew Barrymore at that time, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess this is the star of the movie. And then she dies, and it's like, it's just such a great announcement that this film and this franchise are going to take you in twists and turns that you're not expecting. So just hold on for dear life, because leading up to that, you would think, oh, wait, okay, this is clearly the lead of the movie. And the way that first phone, it's one of the great scenes in movie history. It's one of the great opening scenes, not just in horror movies, in any genre, because it so locks you into the tone, and it is legit terrifying. But I also loved it because that's probably the impetus for my movie trivia brain being like, oh, movie trivia might be able to save your life, literally. My question to you is, if she gets these movies correct, if she gets these trivia nuggets correct, do they spare her? I still don't think so.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
Halloween. You know, the one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters?
Yeah.
What's yours?
Guess.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Is that the one where the guy had knives for fingers?
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy, that's right. I like that movie. It was scary.
Wow, well, the first one was, but the rest sucked.
Scream 4 kind of answers that question mark, because Kirby, who's played by Hayden Panettiere, is put in the same situation with the Culkin kid. I always forget which one. Rory.
Is it Rory or Kieran?
It's the one who's not in Succession.
Oh, Rory, yeah.
Rory, who's sat on the chair outside by the pool, like Steve in the original opening scene, and Kirby gets the answers right, I think, doesn't she, from memory? Right. And then she goes out, and they open the door, and well, I mean, I guess spoiler alert, Rory Culkin is one of the killers. Proceeds to stab her, but that opening scene, I think, was game changing, and inspired by A Stranger Calls, and did just such interesting things, and I think terrorized people, and they had to sort of one-up it, or attempt to one-up it, every film after that. Is that your favorite scene in the franchise?
It's tough, but I don't know how you feel about this, Jacqueline. I feel like Jamie Kennedy is so great as Randy when he's describing the rules to us, so I am thrilled that he was left alive in Scream 2 long enough to give us the sequel rules. But him in the video store, I mean, again, as somebody in high school, that's what you aspire to. At least for me, that was the goal in life, was to just get to be the authoritative voice at your local video store. And he certainly was that. So when he's breaking down the rules, it's like we're stumbling around in this labyrinth, and we meet some old man who gives us his treasure map that we trust, and that kind of gets us to the castle. So I love that we have that roadmap to go by, but we're also going to break some of those rules with a wink and a nod.
Yeah. I will say what's interesting is every dude who was that guy in their town, whether it be a huge city or a small city, they all think that they're Quentin Tarantino, who's probably the most famous, all knowledgeable movie store guy. Who then happened to make like genre-defying entertainment that like, you know, really changed the way we look at cinema. But most of them are Randy. And like, there's just as many people that are just sick of his crap, if you know what I mean. Like it's just, for as much as I loved him for being accused of being a know-it-all kid, I get why some people are like, stab him quickly. Because I was in the minority. Some people are like, yes, kill him. They did not like Jamie Kennedy, I think. And they just like did not like necessarily him as that character. And so they were all about him meeting a horrible truck in a van. They killed him in a van. Like, I still cannot get over how awful that is. He deserved so much better.
The kids with the boombox come around the corner just to cover it up, which is amazing.
He just deserves so much better. I'm still like,
he
whatever.
He got a great kill. I mean, isn't that what you want in these movies? Like, you want to go off with a bang.
That's how you want to do it.
But in the third act, like, let him be the guy that like shows up and it's like, oh, I think I've saved you. I'm going to make it to the end. And then they kill him. Like, that's a real way to go.
That happens with Dewey. And then he sort of comes out on the gurney later every time. And he's like, I'm fine.
He's like the Energizer
and then he's like,
Bunny.
more of a limp the next time.
Oh my God. He's such
what is
an
the best
Energizer
kill?
Bunny.
Is it the heartbreak that Jacqueline suffered at the hands of Randy's demise? What is your favorite kill in the history of the Scream franchise? I don't want to be hacky and take Drew Barrymore, but it's so good and shocking. But as I referenced, Tatum in the garage door is pretty inventive, and that feels like it's just Wes Craven. That feels like when he was going to set that day, he just had a song in his heart and a giddy up in his step. Couldn't wait to shoot that.
And a very cold fan.
Yeah.
In case Stone people
kids,
know, there's
when you
a
get
lot
older,
of
biology takes over.
There's a lot of cold air going on Rose McGowan's shirt in that scene, and I don't think it was necessarily needed. But
it was the kill that I liked, Jacqueline. Joel, do you have a kill that stands out that gets you out of bed in the morning?
I think, I would also say if we're taking Barrymore off the table, which I think we should because I think it's the one.
That's right? Like the first round of fantasy draft. Yeah. Everybody's going to take that one.
Yeah.
I would say then it goes to Jada. But the other one I do want to shout out is the sorority girl, Cece, Sarah Michelle Gellar, in the big empty sorority house because she's sober sister, which I guess I'll ask offline if that's another thing that they do in these sororities.
It is.
Okay, yeah. She's sober sister, and so she gets the kind of the phone call. And I really like that because I felt it just gave us that opening scene of Scream, original Scream vibes, but also because Wes Craven can direct, not with his eyes closed, because maybe he directed Cursed and with his eyes closed, but he can just direct these movies like nobody's business. And the framing and sort of build up in that scene and just the sort of way that he allows Ghostface to slip in behind her and sort of has us constantly on edge about what's going to be coming in and out of the frame. And the writing of that scene is actually really good as well. The girl upstairs, the Ted, and then ultimately a sort of iconic finale to that scene where she gets thrown off the balcony in a shot that goes on way too long for the height of that balcony. I'm not sure what the temperature was like on set that day, but she was wearing sort of a ribbed cardigan, so maybe we wouldn't know. I shouldn't say that's probably disgusting, but it was a great kill for me.
The casting throughout all these movies is really impressive because you brought up, obviously you have Neve Campbell as our quote final girl, Sidney Prescott, and she's just got such the right balance of innocence and toughness because she's been through stuff that no high schooler should have to go through, and she really wears that on her sleeve throughout these movies. I also think David Arquette is ingenious casting as a young cop who's trying to still prove himself, who is still a dope, but also really wants to be a man, and you realize that being a man is more than just having a mustache and a and a badge. But scout out to Skeet. I mean, he's great. He is exactly who I want her boyfriend, who turns out to be the killer, to look like. Him and Matthew Lillard together. It's just, you have so much gold in that initial cast.
Rose McGowan, though, like talking about casting, Rose McGowan in that original Scream as Tatum is so good, like lightning in a bottle. And then I think Scream 4 is actually pretty well cast. If you think about Hayden Panettiere as Kirby, who sort of comes in and is like a complete breath of fresh air. And I should note, dies in a way, quote unquote, dies in a way that she may not be dead. Who knows? Because we don't see this sort of full death scene. So could she be back for number 4? 5. Which is actually not called Scream 5.
What's it called? Scream.
It's a Scream. And then parentheses 2022. But the other one I want to shout out as casting is Marley Shelton as Deputy Judy in Scream 4. So she's the deputy to Dewey and she's sort of flirting with him. And Courtney Cox's Gail Weathers feels threatened, and she brings him lemon squares. And she survived. And she's now sort of melding into the 4 because she's going to be in Scream 2022 as well. And she's really fun.
Wait a minute. I also just want to add, they made Gomer Pyle get in a horror movie, which I think, like, in itself, like, if there were, like, I know Dewey has had his day, but just the fact that they put Gomer Pyle in a horror movie and let that play out over the course of 4 movies, now 5, very interesting.
Henry Winkler as well. Who's never out of fashion, but really was great as the principal in number 4. And I think in terms of like a quick kill, that's a great fun little
It's
scene.
a sneaky good kill in the first movie when the principal eats it, because he's looking in the mirror, and especially at that time, I think we were all ready for him to do a Fonz moment, some sort of reference to Fonz. He's checking his hair, and he gets murdered instead. The Fonz, he jumped a shark, but he is now fallen.
Yeah. Also uncredited. Henry Winkler was not in the credits for that movie. And I forget what that's an homage to, but there was like somebody famous cameos that also, like, because they didn't want there to be on their IMDb or like whatever, they never put their name into the actual credits.
Scream fans are going to kill me if I get this wrong, but I believe there is also an uncredited cameo within that scene, a nugget within a nugget, when he is looking in the hallway to see if there's someone out there. There is a man in a Freddy Krueger style sweater mopping the floor, and that is Wes Craven himself.
I think you are correct on this, sir.
It's a great nod to Freddy Krueger and Henry Winkler as the principal. It just added up to such a fun mesh of cat and divergent personalities in that first movie, and it spawned this franchise that we get now. And so before we transition into the behind the scenes stuff, because I do want to get everybody's take on what we're hoping to expect from Scream 2022, I do have a couple questions about trivia. I just want to test Joel's fandom. Jacqueline can play along too. I have a couple Scream trivia questions that you should know, but you might get a couple of these jumbled. So, Joel, Jacqueline could be your lifeline. What is rule number 1 on Randy's list of rules for surviving a horror movie?
Oh, Lord. Don't have sex.
Joel gets the point. That is correct. Do not make love until after.
Oh, sorry. Don't make love.
You survived the movie. I believe he has sex, so that counts. All right. Your next question. 2 remaining. Which actress does Sydney say would probably play her in the movie version of her life?
Tori Spelling.
Joel is 2 for 2, and he is cooking now. But now we come to the hardest
question.
And
she does, instead.
Yes, she does.
Yes.
In the first Scream, how many seconds delay does the hidden camera in Stu's house have?
Oh, and my brain is saying 30 or 10.
I can give you multiple choices.
This is also an amazing kill. Just FYI, Kenny the cameraman.
It's a great kill, because they're all at a party and they're watching Halloween, and they set up a hidden camera, and then the delay is too long, and then the poor.
I'm gonna say. Do you want to give me? No, I'm gonna say 30.
Joel says 30. This guy has seen these movies in bunches. That is correct. Joel Meares, editor-in-chief of Rotten Tomatoes, going a perfect 3 for 3 on Scream trivia. A couple of those could have tripped him up, but not Joel. So, Joel, the last word in this section is going to go to you. What is it about this Scream franchise that you just want to remind everybody about why you love it so much?
Well, I think there's 2 things. I think one of the things is that it's the rare horror franchise where you're actually drawn to the survivors more than the killer. It's defined by the core characters who are actually unmasked, in a sense. So Halloween, Laurie Strode's important, of course, but Michael Myers, Jason, Freddy, etc., are the faces of their respective franchises. And this is really about Dewey, Gail, and of course Sydney, and they are the pulling thing. And I think there's such a great dynamic between them. I think Sydney is just an incredibly powerful, strong survivor that it's something that I'm really drawn to. I know she pissed off dear Jacqueline a couple of times, but there is something about Neve Campbell in this role that I think is just magnetic and defining and iconic. And I think there's a reason we continue to follow her through. It's also the only franchise that we've seen so far, 5 movies now in a row, where all of the cast has stayed the same. I'm rambling, but also it's one of the rare franchises where they actually cared about each film, right? You know, that first film, often they go with the sequel and it gets trashed and they just bring in anyone, but they really made important decisions creatively about who they brought in to be steering this ship. And we'll talk about it in the next segment. But yeah, I think, you know, obviously there's some nostalgia and it hit me at the right time in my life, but it's survival and care and craft.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to sum it up. And so with that, let's go to behind the scenes. The question is this: do we consider Courtney Cox and David Arquette and Neve Campbell to be the dogs of this franchise in that they're unkillable? Are they unkillable because Scream 5 comes out in January, or is one of them going to get off? How can this franchise continue to surprise us by keeping all of them alive?
Jacqueline, do you want to take this or do you want me to go first?
I think you should go first because in all honesty, I'm kind of like of two minds about it. I'm like, if you kill them at this point, I'm not going to be like 100% mad about it if you do it in a way that feels like you're absolutely passing the torch.
Yeah.
Very like Robert Downey Jr. in Endgame type way. But if you kill them and it just feels like Randy, I'm going to be mad.
Yeah, I think one of them at least has to die. I'm going to put it out there. I think you can't, I mean, 5 films in, 5 of these sort of scenarios, it's getting a little silly in some way. It could getting a little bit silly. You could say that, especially Dewey, because he almost dies in basically every film. I do think they've got to be extraordinarily careful about how they do it. I think a sacrifice element is probably the best way to do it. We've seen that in Endgame. And maybe some other movies that have been out this month, which I would talk about. But there's, it's a really interesting thing. I think also this film is really being set up as a passing of the torch in a way that Scream 4 was kind of set up, but then Emma actually turned out to be the killer. So they couldn't go that way. This time they've got this extraordinary young cast. Is it Jessica Barrera from In the Heights, along with Mason Gooding Jr., all these sort of great young actors who are there to really take that torch. I think they're setting it up where at least one of them has to die, but I do think it's a high wire act to really get that
Jenna
down.
Ortega, Dylan Minnette,
Yes.
Melissa Barrera in there. But
Melissa
here's the thing,
Barrera.
though, is that, Jacqueline, we need to revisit this prediction because now we need to see this movie together opening night. I feel like they're all getting out. I feel like they're all getting out of this thing scot-free.
I mean, again, I feel like if Joel is saying one of them's got to die because it's cartoonish and you're saying they've all got to make it because they're the Holy Trinity, I'm of two minds about it. I really am. I'm like, make the candle worth the flame, and I'll be with Joel. But I'm telling you, if it ends up being weak sauce and I feel they're doing it just to do it, basically, I'm being simplistic and saying make it good, which is like such an easier thing than done. But I will say this: I will be more forgiving of them letting them live and having it be weak sauce than I will of them killing them and having it be weak sauce.
Yeah, that's
sure. That's a fair point. And so, Wes Craven is the guy responsible for not just this franchise, but so many of the great movies that we got that are winked and nodded at by this franchise. Originally it was going to be called Scary Movie, and it spawned a Scary Movie franchise. So the Wes Craven factor into this, I feel like Wes Craven is that rare hard director that we all gave such credibility to that could pull something like this off. And I love the joke in there that Tatum says, like that Wes Carpenter guy in the first one, it giving a nod to John Carpenter as well. And so Wes Craven.
And this is the first one without him. That's going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah. But it's a good team behind it. It's I'm now forgetting their individual names, but they're a collective known as Radio Silence, right?
It's Matt Bettinelli Olpin and Tyler Gillett. And I think one of the reasons why they were able to get somebody like Neve Campbell back is because, according to Neve Campbell, they're like, hey, you're the reason why we love horror movies. Like you're the reason why we do this. And so we've seen that in the past, though. If you're too close to the source material, you're too much of a fan. Sometimes it's hard to do your own thing with it. But Joel, you have a lot of faith in what they're going to do.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, they're the filmmakers who made Ready or Not, which is a film that came out 2 years ago with Samara Weaving, where she was sort of brought to a mansion to meet, I think, on her wedding day, and then there's a game that the family plays. It's a very, very effective horror comedy, extremely well received. And you can see tonal similarities between you can see why they were a good fit. And I actually did get to interview Neve Campbell last year for a film she did with Alex Wolff, actually, Jacqueline, who was a guest on our podcast. And
friend of the show.
She said they wrote her a letter and they said all of that stuff, and they said that they really want to honor Wes. They have so much respect for him and his vision that's what sort of got her to sign on, which is exciting. So
nice.
I do have faith in them. They also contributed to a anthology movie called Southbound, which is really, really effective and scary. Among that sort of like multiple story horror thing. So they've got the chops. I do have faith. And the cast is really good. The young cast, I think, is really exciting as well.
Okay, well, look, again, whatever we're all doing in January, Jacqueline, I know your schedule gets packed there. You got to make a night for us. We all got to do this together.
I think I can make time for that.
We got to get Producy Lucy there because she's going to be terrified, and that's going to be fun to watch. Lucy, are you signing up for our Scream 5 opening night voyage?
Yes, but you have to pay me. Real
We'll pay you in popcorn and all the soda you can drink. I know our beloved engineer Christian Rubalcaba today. Brian Perez is going to want to go too. It's going to be a fun. All right, let's transition over to Mailbag. We love all of the members of our Ketchup crew who are listening today. They're certified fresh in our hearts, and this one comes from Ilan Musket, who wrote us at rtiswrong@rottentomatoes.com. Y'all can follow Ilan's lead and send us an email with your thoughts, what movies you want us to talk about coming up soon. And Ilan writes, hello, Mark, Jacqueline, and to the rest of the team and the Ketchup crew. Ilan here, writing from Toronto, right at the beginning of TIFF. I just finished listening to Mark's fantastic discussion with Chance the Rapper while washing the dishes. We help you be productive with the household chores. Cleanup happens late when you've got 2 toddlers. I want to advocate for a movie that I believe is shockingly underrated. Vin Diesel's passion project, 2004's rollicking gothic space epic, The Chronicles of Riddick. Its predecessor, the more modest Aliens knockoff Pitch Black, got a reasonable 60% on the Tomatometer, so it's tied with Scream 4. But Chronicles of Riddick, which takes much bigger swings and stacks the deck with excellent classical actors doing top-notch work, Judi Dench, Colm Feore, Carl Urban, Thandie Newton, and a return visit from They Live's Keith David, but it only managed a rotten 29%. Thanks and happy arguing. That is from Ilan in Toronto, Canada. Thank you so much, and give our best to the 2 little ones, Dad. The Chronicles of Riddick. Joel, you are the editor-in-chief of Rotten Tomatoes. I know you don't influence the Tomatometer, but 29%, you got some folks north of the wall not happy about that.
Yeah, there might be something a little strong in her dishwashing detergent, I think. So the little fumes getting to lovely Ilan's mind. No, look, we all have our films that we go to bat for. I will, to this day, die on the hill that is Scream 3. So all I'll say is, yeah, sure, it's worthy of discussion, I guess. The only thing I remember seeing that film and not thinking a lot of it, not thinking it was a disaster. So I could revisit it and give you an opinion, but I did remember Judi Dench. I was like, this is the movie with Judi Dench and Vin Diesel, right? And
with Judi Dench and Vin Diesel.
That alone, I think, maybe deserves a 50. Just that in the credits.
Now we get to see him and Helen Mirren driving, speeding all over the place together. Joel Meares, the editor-in-chief of Rotten Tomatoes. It's always a pleasure when you stop by. Thank you so much for your insight, for your bravery in standing Scream 3. I am so looking forward to seeing what our loyal listeners have to say about that. I think they're going to agree with you for the most part. I think that a lot of people feel like this movie got a little bit shafted.
Yeah, totally. It's scary, it's funny, it's a good time, and it's got some depth. Also, the best cameo in the entire franchise, Carrie Fisher in the archives. Look out for it.
Not going to argue with that logic at all. So you always ask the guest at this point, what are you working on? What upcoming projects do you have? I know you got a book coming out soon, right?
We do. I could reach, but I can't. I was supposed to actually, but yes, we do. We've got a book coming out November 9, The Ultimate Binge Guide, 296 TV shows that changed the way we watch television. So get that into you. It's a great book. Jacqueline contributed. I contributed and wrote for it, plus a bunch of other people. It's fantastic, and it's hard. It's really beautiful. I'm really excited about how beautiful it is. You're going to want to give this to people.
Okay. I'm excited to check it out. And I think it's going to make the Christmas gift of this year. But again, we're not at Christmas. We're at Halloween. So, Joel, do you have any fun recommendations in the way of movies that the kids should check out during the spooky time of year?
Always. I watch Trick or Treat every Halloween at least once, which is the brilliant anthology with young pumpkin kid. It's such a joy. And I'll give some shout outs to some good old-fashioned Australian horror. I would say watch Rogue, which is a great crocodile movie. Maybe not as good as the alligator movie Crawl, but certainly very, very fun.
Oh, I love Crawl so much.
Then, we could talk about Alejandro Aja. Well, we were talking about him offline earlier. But and then I would say The Loved Ones, which is a sort of really, really interesting movie about a young woman who kidnaps a boy prior to their prom / what we call in Australia the formal, and then kind of tortures him. And it's very violent and scary and good. And I believe it's certified fresh at 90-something ridiculous on the Tomatometer. So that's The Loved Ones from about 2000 and somewhere between 2009 and 2011.
Oh dear! Why would you kidnap? Why would you invite more teens into your life than is already necessary? That's a question for another day. After seeing that movie, Jacqueline, I don't think that we're quite done with the horror movie season just yet here at the show. Reminder, you can email us anytime, rtiswrong@rottentomatoes.com. Subscribe, rate, review, whatever platform you choose to listen to this podcast. We thank you for your support, and make sure you do whatever that platform encourages you to do to get this rated positively, because y'all have been so good at it. So let's keep up the good work. Thanks to Joel Meares, the editor-in-chief of Rotten Tomatoes. Make sure y'all check out the Ultimate Binge Guide when it is released sometime in the next few weeks and or month. You can follow him on Twitter. He's a great follow, and he occasionally retweets when I post stand-up dates, which you can get tickets for stand-up at markellis.live. Jacqueline Coley, my esteemed co-host, Lucy Bruckner, Producy Lucy, Christian Rubalcaba, our great engineer, for the whole team here at Rotten Tomatoes, and for all of those who fell during the Scream franchise, we send our best wishes, and thanks for listening. We'll see you next time at Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong.